Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Again, thank you so much for joining us for our Systems for Action Research and Progress webinar series. My name is Carrington Lott, and I am the Deputy Director at Systems for Action. And if you're not familiar with our program office, we are a national research program funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we're housed at the Colorado School of Public Health in the Health Systems Management and Policy Department. Um, One of the main activities that we do at Systems for Action is to develop and release annual funding opportunities that research teams can apply to with their own innovative system alignment mechanisms and interventions that they want to study that align the medical, public health, and social service systems. So we've been funding research since 2015 and have a portfolio of over 50 projects that have been funded all across the country to date. And this is a research and progress webinar series where we typically ask our grantees to come and present sort of in real time, like in a rapid process, what they're learning about their research along the way. And so they present multiple times throughout their projects. Today is a special presentation. It is through our System Alignment Innovation Hub, which was developed about 3 years ago. And the whole point of the System Alignment Innovation Hub was to, or is to support community-based organizations that are interested in participating in systems alignment research, whether that's conducting their own research themselves, forming relationships with research partners, or just finding existing research and trying to implement it into their own programs. And so the Innovation Hub offers many different sort of avenues and mechanisms to participate in their program. One of those is the equity capacity building grant process that they started back at the beginning of this year, so early 2025. They heard from a lot of community-based organizations that they were working with that there were just barriers that were related to organizational capacity that was really keeping them from being able to participate in research. And so, in thinking through this, the Innovation Hub developed an equity capacity building grant process using a trust-based philanthropy model, tried to remove a lot of the barriers that are required in order to apply for this more rigorous type research funding, make the process as easy as possible to be able to apply and to communicate what your idea was and how this money could help build your capacity so that your organization could participate in research in the future. So through this equity capacity building grant process, there were 10 projects that were funded, and many of them are going to be presenting in this Research and Progress webinar series over the next couple of months. Today, you're going to be hearing from Thomas Cotton and Larry Washington on the New G movement. Thomas is also a previous Systems for Action grantee, and so he's very familiar with the Research and Progress webinar series. He's come and presented many times, so you might have seen his face before. But he's going to be presenting on some new research that they're doing in this new project. So it's really exciting to have them come and join us. I think that's all I'm going to say about introducing the Equity Capacity Building Grant process and the Innovation Hub. I think just before I hand it over to the team to talk a little bit more, just some housekeeping details. Um, Today's session will be recorded, and we will send out the recording as well as the slides and any other resources that are covered during today's session in an email after today's webinar. And also, if you have questions at any point, we will reserve time at the end of today's session for Q&A. So if you have a question, locate the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, pop your question in there, and we will make sure that we save time to address that at the end. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks so much for joining. Thomas, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Carrington. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a presentation about the New G movement. Can't wait to share more with you about it. First, I want to say thank you for the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub, the Systems for Action team, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for believing in the community that we can get work done. Without the process that we went through, getting this movement off the ground would have been a lot harder. But they see the vision, they understand the vision, and they have the belief and faith that we can accomplish what we set out to do. As Carrington mentioned, I have been a part of the Robert Wood Johnson family for a few years now, and done a lot of different research projects. And this one is near and dear to my heart, and you'll see why as we go through it. Again, my name's Thomas Cotton. I'm the initiator of the New G movement. I'm also the founder and chief redemption officer of Redemption and Advancement Alliance. And I will share a lot more about who I am through this process. And I have joining me today to give commentary Dr. Larry Washington. He's a vital part of the New G movement also. He has an amazing background, an amazing story, and he'll share a little bit more about his work and what he does during his commentary time. As Carrington mentioned, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat and we will be able to answer those questions hopefully at the end toward the end of this session. So we're just going to go through the work that we do with the New G movement and have a little commentary and hopefully have some questions. So our goal with this New G movement, if you don't understand what G is, from neighborhoods across the country, a G is a gangster. So you probably heard the term OG, like the original gangster. So the new G movement is about this new mindset that we have. It's to redevelop gangs to improve leadership and restore communities, and redefine the power by transforming how society understands and engages with gangs. And so we're going to talk about the redevelopment of gangs, not the dismantling of gangs, to be the leadership that restores communities. And I know that kind of sounds different because a lot of times the way people approach gangs and gang intervention is to either dismantle them or pull people out of their gangs. And the issue with pulling people out of their gangs is it creates this vacuum, this trauma, so to speak, because what you're doing is you're saying you have to leave your family in order to correct your life. The people who you've been with, the people who have fed you, the people who are willing to die for you. You need to leave them and come over here and trust us. But the reality is we need to create a trust-based system so that transformation and community restoration can happen. So I'm just going to share a little bit today about the gaps in the existing gang intervention systems, why they fail, and I'm going to introduce to you this compassionate, trustworthy approach that examines the creation of new options for the redevelopment of gangs. And so we'll go through this today, and I'm looking forward to it. This is not a shameless plug. Maybe it is, but if you want to know more about the New G movement, the New G mentality outlines a philosophy for reframing the gang mindset and redeveloping the infrastructure. Um, this movement and mentality go together because gangs have a network of lived experience, and there's a way that gangs think and the way our society thinks about gangs, and both of those mindsets need to change if we're going to promote health equity. So we have to be able to bring networks together to collaborate and produce evidence that transform the understanding of what public safety is, family well-being, economic health, and really look at the strong interconnection of redeveloping gangs. And so the new G mentality is how you invest in development and not demise, and how we get people to come on board and businesses and community and health sectors and social services and criminal legal system and different other things to come on board to support and provide the resources necessary to develop these gangs or redevelop these gangs to be at the center of the transformation. And so when we look at what we see here, the social stratification and exclusion, when we think about social stratification and exclusion, we see the systems at work. And this means basically the society ranks categories of people in hierarchies based on factors like wealth, income, education, and power. And so the system's doing what the system does because it results in unequal distribution of resources, rights, and privileges, where higher ranks have more resources than lower ranks. And so we can see this when the distribution of property tax in some states. We can see this in many different layers around the economy where certain banks or grocery stores or any business does not want to go into a certain community because there's so much crime. There's so many different things that that go on in these communities that it doesn't seem like a good business opportunity for them. And so they will not go into these communities. But it doesn't change the fact that that also, you know, plays a part in all that we're looking at. So the layers in social stratification are also often based on social or biological characteristics such as class, race, age, and gender. And so when we start thinking about this, the lower level, their voice is not heard as much as those on the higher level. So even if we can rally together and we can start to make sense with what's necessary and needed for these communities, those with the resources and power can easily sway by the money they give or how they are able to connect with the people who can make the decisions. And so it's important for us to understand that this is one of the main issues. The consequence of this is those who are further from the centers of power are stigmatized. They're politicized, marginalized, any eyes that you want to look at. And so they are really shunned into an alternative system of belonging or survival. And as you see those furthest from power, they have the challenges of trying to overcome multiple barriers just to get the same simplistic resources as those on the other side of the track, so to speak. So when we start thinking about alternative systems of survival, we got to really start looking at what are our alternative systems within our community that can help overcome these challenges and true barriers that we have plenty of research around, barriers that you can just drive around any community and see it, any underserved community. Those communities that you look at and you're saying, yeah, I don't want to drive through that community. Go drive through that community and take a look, and you'll see. Um, but one of the things we're missing is that we're missing because of these issues, the leadership and the identity and the type of protection that's within these communities. So we have to start looking at things a little bit different. So when we start looking at systems and I talk about leadership and structure and the different things that are in this community, it's all around gangs. Gangs arise in this space because they're like a parallel system. And we kind of miss that because the language that we have around gangs, and rightfully so sometimes, is they're violent and that they're no good, they're thugs, they're this. And so we have these biases that have been taught to us for years. But we don't realize that within these marginalized rungs, they have a sense of belonging. They have a family structure. They are connected in a way that develops identity, that develops protection, loyalty, and so many other things. And there's not many systems that you can look at in this society, in our society, and see that people are willing to die for the person that's right next to them. Like, I'm willing to lay down my life for you because we're in this together. We're that deep. And so when we start looking at that, we can't look at that, continue to look at it as just a negative. There's so much positivity that goes into that aspect of it. But the way it is developed and carried out and executed, it usually ends up being in a negative sense. It ends up with negative outcomes and so many other things. So what if we, instead of trying to dismantle these parallel structures, we start addressing the underlying exclusion of the from our society? And that's what we have to start looking at because we don't want to. This is like cutting off like your hand getting cut and not addressing the wound or healing the wound. Eventually it's going to get infected, and eventually it's going to start looking bad, and eventually you just want to cut that part of your body off. No, we have to really see that the cuts that have happened over time and everything that has gone on that has happened to these communities and begin to heal those wounds and begin to address the underlying exclusions. And so we have to be able to move those things forward. So when we start thinking about it, society tries to dismantle the structures without healing it. And so we have to begin to remember healing takes place, and if it can hurt, it can heal. And so we have to take time though. This is not this the new G movement and what we're doing within this as far as the research and the systems that we're creating. This is not something that's going to take, 2 years to do, 5 years to do, one funding cycle to do. This is a long-term growth that we need to do because we think about gangs in California. For me, I'm from California, and in my lifetime, I've watched gangs really grow to the point where it was just the LA Crip and Blood thing, and then next thing you know, there was many other uh, gangs in the state, across the country. Now Crips and Bloods are everywhere, and it's taken 50 years to go from the initial beginnings to where we see it today. Well, if we're going to really redevelop gangs and really create systems that support people, we have to give ourselves time. And I'm looking at the same amount of time that it took to get us to where we're at today. We need to create systems that allow us to redevelop to see a better tomorrow. Give us the same 50 years that has it. And I don't think it'll take 50 years to change a life, but I do believe we can really have a good foundation given that first 50 years. Um, and so when we start thinking about the key data points, gangs, uh, growing up, there was a song called Colors by Ice-T. Some of you all may know it, some of you may not. But there's a verse in it that says the gangs of LA will never die, just multiply colors. And this is early to mid 80s that was going, I think it was 85 or something like that. And you think about it, if that was 1985, 40 years later, what does it look like? And he wasn't lying. The gangs multiplied and the colors multiplied. Um, and it's because there's a lot of failed systems that multiplied also. There are opportunities to really rebuild the city after the 1992 riots in LA or uprising in LA. There was an opportunity to rebuild, but there's a failed system, there's failed promises, and so many other things that took place. But you know, we have to look at it now. Over 30,000 gangs exist nationwide, which is a 15% increase since 2006. And so when we start looking at the statistics, when you go into statistics around gangs, they're all over the place. But the key thing that we can see is there's a lot of gang members and there's a lot of gangs across the country. But one of the things that stands out is law enforcement documented 69,000 plus violent gang incidents involving youth ages 13 to 16. A few weeks ago, I met with the top gang officer for lunch to just really talk to him about gangs where I'm at. And he and I had a great conversation. He had so much to say about gangs and things that I didn't even know. There's these hybrid gangs. So you have the OG gangs that are the older people who are just like, I'm staying out of the way. I'm not, I'm not about getting into that life anymore. I'm not trying to lose my life. But then you have this hybrid where there's a break off of that OG gang to a point where these are younger guys who are, trying to make things work for themselves, trying to make a name for themselves. And then you have this sub-hybrid gang where there's young kids as young as 13 years old or even younger than that out selling drugs, and they're using social media to do all their work and to do their business and to set up shootouts. And then he was telling me about stories about them setting up shootouts, and it was just crazy. But what we're talking about is we're talking about generational failure. And because our society has failed generations so much that the generations afterwards are going to continue to get worse and worse if we don't do anything. So, because gangs are going to adapt to their environment, they're going to go where they feel um, connected, and so we need to make sure that we understand they're not going to diminish. Okay, so um, when we have failed solutions, we have to realize that suppression and dismantling are counterproductive. Uh, when people are looking at the dismantling of gangs, It doesn't happen. People have true roots, loyalty. A lot of gang members have tattoos all over them that they're excited to get because they see this is worthwhile for them. They're able to wake up every day and be excited about being in gangs. They talk about the gangs with an affinity that most people don't talk about their work about in the same way. And so when we start thinking about reinforce the reinforcement of the regeneration structure, we have to start looking at uh, the everything's counterproductive because this reinforcement uh, makes people want to do it harder. If you're fighting against me, I want to go harder. I'm going to stay in the game. I'm going to do everything I can to buck against the system, so to speak. And so, what happens is they strengthen the internal cohesion of those games. And so, when we start looking at the loyalty and everything else, they're continuing to move forward. And so, as we start looking at, when gangs are disrupted, the hybrid gangs, the sub-hybrid gangs pop up, and things become more and more volatile. And so, we have to begin to understand like there has to be a better way. And the better way to us is the New G movement. And the New G movement is birthed out of the New G mentality book, but it's also just many different conversations I've had. I've talked to thousands of gang members, thousands, and there are some similarities with all of them. There are a lot that have said, if there was a different way, I would have chose it. If I would have known then what I know now, I would have done something different. The other biggest thing is, do you want to be in a bad situation is a question I ask all of them and up to 15,000, over 15,000 other people, the same question. Do you want to be in a bad situation? No one's ever said yes. And do you want your life to be better? And every single person has said yes. So the truth is, the desire for a better life is in all of us, but sometimes the way we go about trying to get there causes most of our problems. And so we have to focus on redevelopment, generating new forms of knowledge that are grounded in lived experience and community wisdom. The challenge is our research doesn't show the facts I just shared with you that every single person, 100% of the people want their life to be better. And 100% of the people don't want to be in a bad situation. But when it comes to trying to survive, to eat, to continue to move forward in life, to just protect yourself, young black men have this in their mind. If you don't know, people in the community, they're involved with gangs or just in underserved communities. Black men don't think they're going to live past 21. So there's this desperation that's created. And I don't know how that became a thing from California all the way to the East Coast, because that's the way I used to think back before I was 21. But now we have a whole new generation of people who still feel the same way. And it's amazing that that number 21 feels like a death sentence to many people. And so it's important that we develop and evaluate models that are focused on dignity, health equity, community redevelopment, economic redevelopment, social enterprise, and then aligning systems of public health, education, social services, medical, criminal legal systems. Those are some of the systems alignments that we want to see through our research. If we can align these multiple systems, through S4A and our systems alignment approach, we had three systems we had to align, which was public health, social services, and medical. But when we start thinking about this group of individuals, what other systems do we need to invite to the table to make sure that we can address some of the issues from the time a child is born and what they're born into and the decisions they have an opportunity to make. And so that also includes the educational system and the criminal legal system. So it's important that we begin to treat people with dignity. And that just means that everybody has something to offer. And we must be able to allow them to be a part of what's offered. And so here's our systems alignment approach of the what we're doing with the new G movement. Now, the new G movement is the hub. and we connect with people that are already doing the work. We're not here to replace the work that's already being done. What we're here to do is create systems around that, to really create new perspective around uh, gangs, because gang intervention has been around a long time, and I'm grateful for all those who have been a part of gang intervention because they really care about the lives that are out there. But we cannot continue to look at gang intervention the same way. We have to look at it from a different perspective because obviously it doesn't work. It's still allowing gangs to thrive and grow. And so this is the perspective that we bring. And so it's important to get the citizens or the street connected individuals for buy-in. We have to have faith in community leaders for buy-in. Social services, philanthropic, and corporate partners, academic institutions, and public health systems education. And the great thing is, through my work over the last, especially the last 15 years, I've been able to engage all these systems and see how it makes a difference when we start bringing them together and everybody is on the same page as far as recognizing the most important part of the process, which is the person. And so we have to continue to recognize the person and know that this new G individual is out there, that they do have natural leadership. You know, you may have, if you've ever talked about gangs, you may have heard how skill sets transfer. So if a person was a drug dealer, everything that they learned about running that business, that those skill sets transfer to legitimate enterprise. And so we have to be mindful of that. Um, and so you can see here, it's just there's many different ways they can engage and how it looks. When we start thinking about development as an intervention, we have to really begin to rethink the process. Development is important. We have to stop saying the same things over and over and over again and now start to develop a new process that allows us to change systems. I understand the fact that systems need to be dismantled. And we talk about dismantling systems a lot. But those systems are doing exactly what they're meant to do. And when people fight against those systems are going to try to just buckle down and fight back the way they're meant to fight back. And that fight needs to continue on to try to dismantle systems. But one other way that we need to start looking at things is creating new systems that weaken the other systems. And so if we have a new movement where community-led transformation happens from gangs being redeveloped, that begins to develop hubs of leadership, purpose, and community advancement. And those redevelopment of gangs into networks where they are future focused social, economic, and health ecosystems that turn survival structures into systems of thriving. And so we have to start looking at this systems alignment approach of what we're doing and see how can we make this system thrive and quit trying to just gather research for the sake of research and using, and let me back up. Also, when we do gather research, let's not forget that the best researchers are those who are connected to the issue. We have to start including and elevating the voice of those who are impacted in these systems. So it's just not about gaining research. It's about creating relationship with those who can really speak into the situation. And when you have relationship and you're gathering research from these individuals, you really want to do something about the problem. So you're not just going to gather the research and extract the research for the sake of policy or the sake of publishing or things like that. You're going to extract this research for the sake of development and care for the people that you've developed a relationship with. And so it's important to do that. But one other thing that we need to continue to look at and be mindful of is each one teach 100. There's a saying growing up that each one teach one. And although that it was a great saying growing up, each one teach one, like you have a responsibility as you learn and grow that you must grab someone else and teach that person. And I want to flip that on its head because we need exponential growth. We need each one to teach 100. We need each person whose life has transformed and they've been given an opportunity to intentionally reach out to 100 people and teach them the same principles and help them to understand what it means to teach 100 also. And even if we get 5 out of the 100, there's still an exponential growth that's taking place because we're intentional about passing information on, not just holding it to ourselves. This is what whole life development looks like. This is what community growth is going to look like. And it's not just a miracle that it takes place, but it's the intentionality that we connect people, purpose, and systems to transform not just one person, but 101 people at a time. And so we're looking at that model in a way that we're doing it. And some of the key things that we'll look at, and I'm going to breeze through this really quick. Again, you can find this in the New G Mentality book, but this is what we're looking at. We work with a person and help them develop. We create systems and opportunity through our New G Academy hubs to help develop them and gain access to the current system. And then we align systems that foster the support around the social determinants of health. And then we have community-led projects that train, employ, and empower these local leaders. And we provide the research around how this really transforms communities that can be replicated across our country. I'm going to show a quick video. I just saw this video for the first time about 6 days ago. And there's a video on Netflix called, is it Netflix or Hulu? One of those, Crips and Bloods Made in America. I didn't even know they show stuff like this on Netflix. I was just going through one day and it popped up. So I was like, let me check this out. But there are some things that I've heard all across the country and in many different areas that were just said on this. And so I want you to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
I go to get a job. I'm working for Xerox, and I lied on the application, and they found out I was on parole, and I lost my job.
I used to be jealous of my wife going to work every day. This is my wife, a woman that stood by me, grew up with me, been with me ever since we was kids. And she would go out the house and go to work, and I would be mad at her because she could go to work and I couldn't go. I would be mad because she's paying the bills and I couldn't pay the bills.
Man, I feel like, man, we over here, man, we locked in a box, man. No matter what we do, we get a record, you're not getting nothing. I just got the pen. They don't hire me because I'm a parolee. So what I'm gonna do? Just sit out here and be broke? Stop it. Either I'm gonna sell some weed, some dope, some crystals, some heroin, or I'm finna rob.
To make ends meet.
That's the bottom line.
I'm not finna see my nephew, my son, my mama, or nobody starve because these motherfuckers won't give me no job, so I gotta do what I know how to do.
There's never no cycle to get us out of this. There's just a cycle to get us back into it.
Your reward for gangbanging is to be crippled, lame for life. Your greatest reward is life plus 40 years. Your ultimate reward for gangbanging is death, and you don't come back from that.
If someone right now said, what do you want in your life? I'll give you anything you want. What would it be?
Man, one thing, just one thing, freedom.
My wish would be for Crips and Bloods to realize that everybody else is against us. And if we don't come together, it's gonna be over for us.
So if the resources were here, you're saying these kids wouldn't choose gang?
No, man. No, man. You choose that because it's no hope. You in no man's land. It's no hope.
People taking choices of going to college, and like that's like making a choice. Here you ain't making no choice. There's no choice. It's like you waiting for somebody to come save you, man, and you just ain't gonna never get saved, man.
I did the gang banging, the stomping out the sets, the getting shot, the drive-bys, the getting shot in drive-bys, to going to jail, to all that, right? But had I had a chance or someone else tell me, fool, you playing the devil's game.
Since I've been in the gang, man, I've done been to the county jails, to several penitentiaries, and back and forth through war as far as gunfights and stuff. So this perception that gang banging is wonderful, that it is the lifestyle to live. It's no lifestyle to live, period.
So that is from the mouth of those who have lived experience. And I hope that you begin to understand the redevelopment works. It works to the point where the person talking to you was once that person. I have been able to change, develop, get opportunities, the opportunities I never had growing up, and run with those opportunities. The same discipline and loyalty and everything that I had to what I was doing in the streets is the same way that I was able to grow what I'm doing now. I have been able to work within many different institutions, many different ways of engaging life. I've influenced higher education policies, um, programming, historic organizations and so many other things, not just from the standpoint of my lived experience, but taking that lived experience, which no one else can ever buy, and using my mind and the development and the academic opportunities that I had and everything that I've been able to build myself. Um, and grow and thrive. I had to learn and rethink life in a way that moved everything forward because what we function off in the New G movement is the understanding that transformation is not achieved through dismantling existing systems, but redeveloping the people and processes within them. This model also reorients disconnected institutions in healthcare, criminal legal, education, social services, and medical systems. I've been able to speak into every single one of those systems and help it elevate, help it rise. Because true system change does not begin with programs or policies, it begins with people. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Larry Washington to give commentary about the New G movement. Thank you, Dr. Washington. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I didn't expect to be so inspired by this conversation. I had my talking points and what I wanted to address, but I think I want to lean more so into personal experience than just like accolades and backgrounds for this conversation. And so to begin, I'm Dr. Larry Washington. I'm a community advocate and co-creator and primary evaluator with Become. Become is a nonprofit organization in Chicago that focuses on community engagement and social change. And so most of our work centers on helping communities and organizations reimagine what transformation looks like, especially when it comes to people and places that have been historically misunderstood, marginalized, or just written off, right? And so we approach evaluation not as a judgment, but more of a process of learning, healing, restoration, actualization, and visioning. And so we work together alongside communities to surface their own wisdom, elevate their local leadership, and build systems that reflect that vision of thriving. And so when I talk about evaluation and evaluating something like the new G movement, we're talking about more than just collecting data. We're talking about tracing conditions. We're talking about inviting the most affected by conditions. And we're talking about setting up systems that are geared towards redemption and real sustainability. So in Chicago, a lot of you may not know, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. And early in my childhood development, I was a part of gangs, right? And I didn't realize it, at the time, because that was just a part of, our lifestyle and how we had to create systems to protect one another. But in my community, we were separated. I lived in a predominantly African American community, and we were separated by a train track that was right adjacent to primarily Hispanic community. And so in this location, if you can imagine, a lot of the resources that we needed in as the African American side were on the other side of the train tracks and vice versa. And so one of the many rules that me and a lot of my friends had growing up was that we never crossed the train tracks alone. And that was the first development of our gang, right? And it wasn't intended for any criminal activity. It was just intended so that we can go to McDonald's and get a $1 cheeseburger, and know that we were safe in that regard. And so when I think about just like my growing up and my involvement and connection to gangs, I was first handcuffed in fourth grade, not for anything criminal related, but the criminology of the young black men, right? And that if there was any slight chance that you were involved in something, you were automatically guilty, right? Again, these are all things that are normalized in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Um, my stepfather was a gang chief, and that afforded me a lot of opportunity, and that I had an option that many other of my peers didn't have, right? And I had the opportunity to follow in his footsteps and be involved more in gangs, um, and know that I had like uh, a privilege in that space because he had earned a level of street credit and notoriety in the neighborhood. But I also had that protection to where I could decide if I wanted to do um, sports, or if I wanted to be an academic, or if I just wanted to just be a kid, right? And a lot of my peers, they didn't have that option, right? And these are just things that I'm just living my life and I'm not noticing, but I felt it. I felt the energy. I felt, that's Larry. He's good. In spaces that I went to, they would say like he's good. Don't bother him. Don't worry about him. He's good, right? And that came from just the culture of, the gang involvement and the respect that my stepfather had earned. Well, my stepfather was incarcerated in 2003, and he's not scheduled to get out until 2049. And so that not only shook up my household, but it shook up my understanding of how important and how valuable it is for people to have choice. And my personal journey in academics, as I pursued throughout my educational journey, I also lost a lot of people along the way. And with each individual that I lost, it gave me even more of uh, a desire to stay on the straight and narrow and to live the life that I knew a lot of them wish they had the opportunity to. By the time I graduated from eighth grade, I had lost 3 friends. And by the time that I graduated from high school, I lost 20 friends. And by the time I graduated from my undergraduate degree, the number was up to 50. And so these are all and many individuals who I grew up playing sports with. We shared meals together. We share visions together. Um, we had similar passions, and I don't consider myself to be any different than them. Um, I don't consider myself to be the smartest of students that I've been connected to, or the smartest of my friends group. Um, I had a lot of opportunities. I had great mentors, and I had just a really hard work ethic. And so bringing in my background and my experience and my knowledge about communities that have been underserved and underrepresented, and these stories that don't make it into a lot of academic spaces are what allow me to have a personal investment and insight into how a movement like the New G movement will work, right? And so it's worth like grounding this work in the research and to discuss how reentry and opportunity, especially for Black men who have experienced incarceration or gang involvement, is such a huge issue, right? There's decades of studies from the Urban Institute and National Institute of Justice that show that reentry is it's rarely a smooth process. And reentry is not just about the individual journey or the willpower or the desire. A lot of it is about this systemic maze and systemic barriers and challenges. And many men return to their communities facing housing insecurity, job discrimination, and that heavy stigmatization of their involvement in gangs, right? And then what Thomas so eloquently articulates is that there's a system and community around them that they've built that is valuable to their survivability, right? We're talking about surviving, right? We're talking about feeding yourself, feeding your family, caring for loved ones, and being a protector, right? Which are many innate character traits of Black men and many of our value systems, right? And so what the reality is that although many people want to get a job and want to be out of this lifestyle, there's not systems in place to support that. And so that's where the new G movement comes in. And this developmental model that offers a pathway of transformation. And so what we want to do is look at this pathway on many different levels. On the individual level, so we're going to look at the shifts in self-perception and like how the experience and knowledge ultimately change how we interact with obstacles, right? And how each of the participants describe their own process of trauma, and how healing could be an intervention to that, how each individual explains and describes their decision making. But also we really want to uphold and uplift that hope for the future, which a lot of individuals who have been placed into the system have been stripped away from, right? At a group level, we want to examine the brotherhood, right? The accountability, the groupthink, the herd mentality, and using that for positivity, right? And using that towards uplifting one another and building relationships that are grounded in mutual respect, responsibility, and care for one another. And as they begin to redefine who they are and redefine leadership and redefine community and what it looks like to have your brother's back and what it looks like to be willing to die for someone, we want to look at that core and use that in a way to build up systems that they can have each other's back to keep each other from going back to a lifestyle that has been harmful for them, right? But not only looking at it in a way to which we're not shunning what they have experienced, but looking at opportunities to gather around transformation as a group. And then we also want to look at from an organizational and a systemic level and how institutions can support these new leaders, right? How we can provide opportunities for employment, how we can leverage a lot of faith that many gang members have strong spirituality and beliefs, and how we can use that as a bridge and as a connector to help them to be able to not only improve their own lifestyles, but as Thomas, I love when he uses that phrase, reach one, teach 100, right? And so all of these things are the ways in which we want to evaluate this process and be intentional about involving the G's, because that's what they are, in this process and building something that's going to be sustainable and hopeful and something that they themselves can be proud of and promote, and do the recruitment. And ultimately, one of the things that I love about my organization, Become, and our founder, what she put in our mission is that we want to work ourselves out of a job. And so we'll know the work is done when we don't need to do this type of work anymore. And so thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Thomas, for the invitation. And I love to address any questions, and have deeper conversation about everything that we've learned and shared today. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for that presentation and for talking about your work. I think it's really important. work that you're doing, and also extremely helpful to have your own lived experience kind of thread into this work. It's obvious that you have passion about it and really care about the communities that you're working with. So thank you so much for coming and talking about it. We have entered into the Q&A portion of today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter it into the Q&A box and we can make sure to address it. And before moving on to some of the questions that I've seen come in, I want to say what stood out to me really in the video that you shared, Thomas, was a young man said, "You choose that life because there is no hope." And to me, there's so much meaning wrapped up in that because it's failures of systems for so long that have created this sense of hopelessness and created a world in which these are the choices that these young men have, and how systems have failed them, but also how like that narrative becomes like young Black men choosing this life and not really seeing the big picture, and then how people internalize that. Like there's just a lot wrapped up in that one statement that young man shared, and that really stuck with me. Okay, moving into the first question that I see from Ann Carter. They launched a group violence intervention in 2019 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They continue to use the strategy as a partnership between human services, public health, and law enforcement. And I see that there are additional comments from Ann. They often hear that we often hear we have groups in CR versus gangs, and I'm curious about what distinction you would make between the two labels.
What is CR?
Let's see. I don't see that
Rapids?
listed.
No, it's not.
Cedar Rapids.
Yeah. So we often hear we have groups in CR Rapids versus gangs. So groups
Oh,
and gangs.
groups versus
Oh,
gangs. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I got it. Yeah, so in the book it talks about this. Like we're not going to distinguish what a gang is or just people who are affiliated or anything. If it can be if the structure, the system, the criminal legal system can look at it and identify it as a gang, that's the one that's going to determine whether it's a group or a gang. And there's enhancements for gangs and gang members. So, don't, I hope people don't misunderstand. Like, if they're a part of a group or a gang, it doesn't matter because if the system can identify you as gang activity, they're going to put gang enhancements on you if you're ever arrested, and that's where the distinguishing comes from. It's also uh, if you do gang stuff, you're a gang, no matter what you call it. So that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Thomas. Larry, do you have anything to add to that, or would you like to move on to
No,
the next one?
yeah, I would just say that according to the FBI, gangs are associations of three or more individuals, and who adopt a group identity to create an atmosphere for fear and intimidation. But like as Thomas alluded to, um, I've been a part of situations where just three or four of my friends were just hanging out together on a corner. And if the police roll up on us and they decide that you three are a part of a gang with no affiliation at all, you're considered a gang. So it is literally that simple and easy to be labeled as such.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't think I realized the official definition from the FBI of what a gang was and how that can be used very negatively. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question from Rumana. Thank you so much, Thomas, for this presentation. Amazing insight. Could you please go into the role of the de-implementation when it comes to systems change, especially in the context of gang networks?
When we start thinking about and so I'm thinking that you're talking about reducing like the ineffective and harmful practices of what goes on. So when it comes to systems change, um, and it's one of those things where I don't know if it has a role. And I just think it's a way of we don't intentionally look at de-implementation. We look at the implementation of new systems to change the old systems. And so if I'm answering correctly, I think in the context of gang networks, it's really how we develop the gangs and create new research and a new mindset around that that really strengthens the new systems and strengthens the opportunities that gang members have within their communities so they can make choices. Growing up, everyone, I was told, go to college, get a good job, live a good life. But no one ever taught me how to get into college. No one ever taught me the steps. No one walked me through those things. So one of the things about how we empower gang members is knowledge and everything else. So I don't know if it necessarily has a role in what we're doing, but I do believe systems change happens when we start changing people and the people stop investing in the old systems. Larry, do you want to add anything to that?
Um, no, not at this moment. I think that was spot on.
Thank you. The next question is about what makes a hybrid G hybrid. What are the two or more parts to that is the hybrid?
Yeah. So, I was introduced to the hybrid, like I said, a couple weeks ago. And but what makes a hybrid is we have uh OGs, we have the way traditional gang structures are. And then you have those who break away where there's no true rules to the gang. And there's just we are in this, it's kind of like our world if you're born in, let's say 2000, or let's say you're a teenager in the year 2000. You're in a hybrid world where, there's pre-technology and then post-technology. And that's the way gangs are functioning now, is the way the world was before and the way that they have access to new things, new drugs, new types of guns, new ways of thinking. And then when you go the sub-hybrid group, which is the younger, so it's literally broken apart by age. They overlap. And so if you look at the sub-hybrid group, you were talking 11 to 17. And if we're looking at the hybrid groups, we're talking 16 to 30. And if you're talking about the OG group, you're looking at 28 and above. And so there's this overlapping of different groups, and it's just the mentality of the way they engage.
Thank you, Thomas. I think that was very informative. I know we have 2 more minutes left, and I think we can ask one more question, and the ones that we don't get to, perhaps we could share with you, Thomas and Larry, after today's session, and see if we can get some written responses and share those in our follow-up communications. But the last question I'm going to ask for today is, do you work with community leaders and partners to do this work? The examples provided in this specific question are politicians, executive directors, other organizations. And if you do work with the community leaders, could you tell us a little bit about how?
Okay, so I'm going to let Larry talk about the politicians and everything, but I want to add one piece that was not added to the presentation because I didn't know if I had time to talk about it. We work with the circle of experts, and the circle of experts are leading and moving this movement forward. Larry is a part of the circle of experts because his expertise in the space of going from being a part of a gang culture to PhD, he's a part of that. But we also have individuals who have served 22 years in prison, 26 years in prison, 27 years in prison, and we have space for two others that can be a part of this. So we have 5 people in our circle of experts called the commission, and we're the leaders of this movement. I'm the initiator of the movement, but now it's been empowered by 4 other leaders and 2 other leaders who are going to come on eventually to help guide this. Because when we talk about community leadership, it starts with those who are nearest to the solution, those who've been impacted by the process. And Larry, do you want to talk a little bit about how we engage politicians and some of the work you've done with engaging politicians?
Yeah, so about a month ago, I actually met with the city of Chicago's mayor deputy to discuss this program in the New G movement. And our conversation was about evaluation and reentry. But to make a long story short, we are bringing this movement to political spaces. We are looking for opportunity to partner with not only local government, but also with organizations who have been doing this work for years and years now. And so we're just wanting to have a space to bring in our redevelopment program and to kick it off. And our plans and our hopes are to get involved with some of the criminal justice systems and get an inside presence into uh, some of these spaces that we can really lean towards this redevelopment process.
Great, thank you. I know we're 1 minute over, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out today. But thank you so much, Thomas and Larry, for coming and giving an update on your work. I'm sure we'll have you on in the future to give some updates on some of these partnerships you formed and what's going on after this presentation. But again, this is a series of the Research and Progress webinar that we host at Systems for Action, where we'll be having equity capacity building grantees come on and present. And I know that my colleague, Sadina Belmashkin, will include links to the future presentations that we have. But thank you so much for attending today, and we hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.